friends, welcome to the magazine where we're unpacking what you can expect in the issue that is hitting newsstands now and also in your mailboxes. You know what we're doing, which is giving you a sneak peek so that you can know what exactly to expect. And in these sneak peeks, I'm joined by Kathy Spillar, who's the executive director and a founder of the Feminist Majority Foundation, a national organization working for women's equality, empowerment, and nonviolence, and also the executive editor at Ms., where she oversees editorial content and the Ms. in the Classroom program. Kathy joins me in this episode as we're unpacking important matters that you're going to be reading about in our spring 2025 issue. And this includes the cover story, how anti-abortion extremists stopped a Beverly Hills clinic from opening its doors with help from city officials. It's a hot mess, and you'll want to dive right in and to learn about the attacks that are taking place in states that are considered sanctuary, blue spaces of freedom. But those are spaces where there is a doubling, a tripling, a quadrupling of efforts in order to stymie equality, freedom, and reproductive freedom. And so the sneak peek into the magazine also includes if it can happen here. And we have a number of other materials that you want to read in the magazine. And so let's just dive right in right now with Kathy Spiller. So, Kathy, we are unpacking the spring 2025 issue, and it's great to be with you. So, the cover story, how anti-abortion extremists stopped a Beverly Hills clinic from opening. Kathy, many people are thinking California is safe. It's a blue state, and yet what's being reported on is don't be too confident.
That's exactly right. In fact, as you point out, it's supposed to be a safe state. We have the right to abortion in our state constitution, and we have very strong state laws against anti-abortion extremists, harassment, and threats and violence. And yet, this group of extremists was able to, in a very short period of time, about 2 months, intimidate City of Beverly Hills officials into pressuring a landlord to cancel a lease that had been signed. Money had been spent on renovations for a new clinic, and to rescind the lease, and to block a clinic from ever even opening. And if they can be successful here, is our bottom line message, they can take this on the road and it can happen in other places too. And in fact, they're threatening to do just that.
And that's really the important thing to understand, which is that this is not just that there are safe spaces where people can get to, and it's important that people know, yes, get to New York, get to California, get to any number of states, Michigan and others. But the truth of it is that a fight continues to wage in the spaces that many people think have an iron door with a deadbolt lock on it. And what's being reported in Ms. right now, and it's not necessarily what we're seeing in other magazines and news outlets, is that there are vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. And as you say, we're one of the only ones really reporting on what the anti abortion extremists are doing. And of course, they're anti democracy, they're white nationalists for the most part. They believe in the use of violence to oppose those things and people they don't support. But in the case of abortion, they have been given a real lease on life now. Under the Trump administration. The second day he was in office, he pardoned 23 convicted anti abortion extremists who were in prison for violently invading and attacking clinics. And then he went a step further, and his attorney general and the Department of Justice announced that it was no longer going to prosecute most cases under the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances law. That's a federal law that we helped get passed to protect clinics and doctors and patients against this kind of anti-abortion threats and violence. They're not going to prosecute. And that means that states are going to have to step up, state attorneys general, local district attorneys, to prosecute these cases. So we're in a very dangerous period where these anti-abortion extremists have been emboldened by the Trump administration and this Department of Justice, and we are seeing it play out in state after state across this country.
And in fact, if I'm to quote from the article, Trump's pardons of 23 anti-abortion extremist endanger providers and patients from back in January 2025. So on January 23rd, in a move as brazen as was predictable. It says President Donald Trump pardoned nearly 2 dozen anti-abortion extremists convicted during the Biden administration of
Yes,
violating the Freedom of Access to Clinics Entrances Act, which is known as the FACE Act, and even
yes,
those who'd also been found guilty of, quote, conspiracy against rights got a get out of jail free card. Trump told reporters that were present at a news conference that it was a great honor to sign the pardon. And that
yes,
same day, the administration's new Justice Department announced that the 3 pending
yes,
anti-abortion FACE Act cases were being dismissed, effective
yes,
immediately. And per a department memo, no new abortion-related FACE Act prosecutions could be initiated without special authorization. Also, until further notice, the Attorney General would consider filing FACE Act charges
yes.
only if an anti-abortion crime involved, quote, significant aggravated factors such as a death, serious bodily harm, or serious property damage. Kathy, break that down. What do we get out of that? What does it mean?
Well, it means this Department of Justice has largely dismantled what had been an extraordinary effort under the Biden administration to crack down on anti abortion extremist violence at clinics and against doctors and the staff of these clinics all across the country. You know, we not only have now witnessed the overturning of Roe v. Wade and the enactment in many states of these horrific abortion bans, which have closed the clinics in those states. But in the states where clinics remain, where abortion remains legal, and California is one of those states, we are seeing stepped up activity by these extremists. So, what they weren't able to do with the Supreme Court decision, they are attempting to do with extremists who are willing to make threats against providers, to commit violence, and in this case that we report on, to pressure city officials, including police officials and elected city council members, to pressure a landlord to block a clinic from opening its doors here. And this was a very important clinic because it was a clinic that was to provide all-term abortion procedures. So for women in severe crisis later in their pregnancies, this would be the place they could come to if they lived in Texas or Louisiana or Mississippi, where we've seen some horrific examples of women losing their lives because they didn't have the kind of medical care that this clinic was going to be able to provide. And it was being opened in Los Angeles, in Beverly Hills, in California, because of the laws here being so strong. And you could get to it by flying into the airport out here. So this is a real loss nationwide for women who need this kind of medical care. This is one less place they're going to be able to find it.
So it sounds like what you're also saying, Kathy, too, is that folks need to stay alert, stay on their toes, right? It's not enough to be in a safe blue state
Right,
because there are actions like this where there's still, in fact, it may be a doubling and tripling down in those states to make sure that clinics that are about to open never see daylight, and
right,
that the clinics that already exist, making it as difficult as possible for people to be able to get in and get the health care that they need on the other side of those doors. And it also means
exactly.
that with the FACE Act, what it protected people against, it seems that from this, you could show up with guns, with violence and whatnot. I mean, basically, it suggests that so long as you don't kill the person who's the escort, so
That's right.
long as you don't cause serious bodily harm to the patient, the pregnant person. I mean, the fact that it says serious bodily harm. So what if you slap her around a little bit? You kick her
Right.
a little bit? You break an arm, you break a leg. That is that what this Attorney General of the
Yeah,
United States, right? I mean, if we actually
that's what
look
it
at it,
says. Yeah.
serious property damage, what does that mean? It's okay to start the fire so long as the clinic doesn't burn down completely. And Kathy, it's really important that we level set on this because what hasn't been captured otherwise in the news, but has been a feature before on our podcast in the magazine, is that in the last 50 years, there have been nearly 50 bombings of abortion clinics. We have covered the fact that there are doctors who've been gunned down at their homes,
That's right.
in their churches, and other places, where there have been these levels of harm, this kind of violence, a kind of
Right.
domestic terrorism that simply has been swept under the rug. And by what the Attorney General has issued, right? Like, unless death is caused, unless
Mhm.
what is considered by the Trump administration serious bodily harm or serious property damage, they're
Yeah.
not interfering.
No, that's exactly right. And it's not, these kinds of incidents are not isolated to any one part of the country. These similar incidents have occurred in Illinois, in New York. The attorney general there in New York has been very aggressive about cracking down on anti abortion extremist violence and threats. But Maryland, Virginia, literally every state. And this is an orchestrated campaign of domestic terror, just like you said. These are domestic terrorists. And they now have a new get out of jail
Get out of jail
card
free card
and a permission
and a
card from
permission.
this administration to
Well,
use threats and intimidation to close clinics.
so Kathy, just a couple more questions, but on that point that it is domestic terrorism and the connection, as we both know, and through our good friend Liz Winstead and her organization, AAFF, right, Abortion
Mm-hmm.
Access Front, that many of the people who showed up on January
Yeah,
6th
yeah,
to engage in what otherwise was like a coup d'etat to try to
yeah,
disrupt the transition of government after a fair election, were people who protest and engage in violence at clinics that provide
right.
reproductive health care. So that
That's
through
right.
line is important for folks to know. So let me ask you this, Kathy, in terms of what states can do if the Trump administration is saying we won't protect patients. We're not going to enforce federal laws that otherwise would provide for patient safety, doctor safety, et cetera. Do you think that at the states level, it's something that state AGs or state legislatures could, in fact, enact their own
That
versions of face laws?
Absolutely. And that's what's going to be needed. State attorneys general can prosecute under the Federal FACE Act, but only for in civil cases. They cannot prosecute criminally under the federal FACE law. Only the Department of Justice can do that. So if a state doesn't have a state version of its own FACE, and California does, for example, as does New York, then other laws are going to have to be deployed or new FACE state laws need to get passed. But we are now in a period, a protected period, where we cannot any longer rely on the Department of Justice to step in and stop this kind of orchestrated campaign of threats and terror and violence against abortion providers. So we do have to turn to state officials, state attorneys general in particular, to prosecute these cases. And so there is an effort. There is an organization called the Freedom of Alliance, which is state governors, blue state governors, that are looking into all of this. We need to encourage these state attorneys general and state governors to take decisive action because without the Department of Justice to check this activity, this is going to continue. They've had big successes now at Beverly Hills, California. They can claim credit for that. To be able to stop a clinic before it even opens. So we've got to stay vigilant, as you were saying, and we've got to make sure people know that this is going on, which is why Ms. has put it on the cover. It's why it's a major investigative story in this issue of the magazine. We are the only ones who are covering this on a regular basis, what anti-abortion extremists are doing. It is not old news. It is happening now, and people need to be aware.
So I want to turn to a couple of other pieces that are in this issue fighting for democracy in the checkout aisle. We're turning to some positive stuff because Ms. It's always important to look ahead, spring forward. What's our message of hope? And so, what can our readers learn about fighting for democracy in the checkout aisle?
Yeah, we have a great piece that actually suggests companies that you can now start buying from, including online companies that are not backing down from their commitments to diversity and equity and inclusion, that are not complying with Trump's orders before they need to. And so there's ways that you can support by buying particular products and buying through online sources that will show that the consumer has power, real power. The women of this country hold enormous economic power. And we're already seeing it. For example, Costco has been doing quite well in this period, whereas Target and Walmart are having terrible trouble. And it's because people have paid attention and they're putting their dollars where their beliefs are and withholding their dollars from those companies that have cozied up to Trump and are taking on the regressive agenda of this Trump administration. So we want people to know that that's a key piece. And another positive piece is how state equal rights amendments. Until we can get Congress that will vote to recognize the 28th Amendment and the fact that the Equal Rights Amendment has been ratified and is valid. We need to rely on state equal rights amendments and get more of them passed. And so we look at state equal rights amendments in New Mexico and Nevada and New York that have very strong equal rights amendments, and how they can be used to not only fight back against the Trump administration and what's happening with the backlash to women's equality, but actually could be used to do very positive things like guaranteed paid family medical leave, affordable, widespread public childcare availability, sick leave, higher wages, all of those kinds of things that could be done under state equal rights amendments, and including, by the way, protecting reproductive rights and access. So we're hoping that people will see our report, contact activists or state officials in their states if they have a strong ERA, and demand action, especially in this period.
All right, Kathy, and just one more because it's a loaded issue and it's fabulous. A weekly pill, Kathy. Tell our listeners what they can expect when they pick up the magazine and read about a weekly pill.
This is very exciting. Rebecca Gompertz, who sort of conceptualized the whole idea that you could mail abortion pills. She's based in Europe. And she has continued to investigate how the abortion pill, which is mifepristone, could be used in a lower dose as a weekly contraceptive. And it really is the ultimate objective here. And has been a dream of the scientists who were behind the development of the abortion pill, behind the development of mifepristone, is that ultimately it could be used as a weekly contraceptive. And so she is actually undertaking clinical trials in Europe. They're quite large. Ultimately, this will get approved in Europe, we're sure. And our hope, of course, is that we'll be able to get it approved here someday through the FDA. But in the meantime, we want to remind people that abortion pills are available by mail here in the United States, whether you're in a blue state or a red state. But this is a very significant development because what it would do, of course, is free women even more, not to have to wait until they're pregnant to look for abortion pills, but to be able to use this lower dose of mifepristone as a weekly contraception.
Kathy, I'm thrilled about this issue that's coming out. Thank you so much for giving us the rundown, the lowdown about what our readers can expect when they go to pick it up in stores or when they receive it in their mailboxes. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Michelle.
So, friends, be sure to check out this issue when it hits the newsstands. And in the meantime, you can always take a look at what we have online in our digital space. And be sure to tune into the myriad of our podcasts, from On the Issues to 15 Minutes of Feminism and so much more.